Okay, we'll start the meeting, and we're in public session. So could I remind members to ensure the volume on all tablet devices is off, function and F8. Reminding members of their obligation to declare any relevant financial or other interests in relation to today's business. The Communications Office has launched a pilot scheme to assess, is that right, if the use of Wi-Fi enabled electronic devices in the public gallery is viable. This pilot scheme will monitor the effect of these devices. Results will then be delivered back to the Chairperson's Liaison Group for agreement. It also reminds members that those in the public gallery that electronic devices should be turned to airplane mode, not 3 or 4G, put on silent or turned off when they are in the committee room. Members of the public wishing to access the Assembly Wi-Fi system will find details in the gallery rules. Recording and photography are strictly prohibited. Apologies. The following members have offered their apologies. We have an apology from Karen McKevitt, and Gordon Dunn will be a little bit late.
Mr McCrae's late.
However,
okay. Apologies. And I think Mr Bradley possibly.
Okay. Our member. Oh, well, we've got the other apologies. We've got the draft minutes of the meeting on the 18th of February. And just point 21 refers members to the minutes of the meeting on the 18th of February at page 5 in the pack. So if you just take a quick look there at the minutes of the meeting on the 18th of February, members are content that that's an accurate record of the business. Okay. I'll take that as agreement. Thank you. So we're about to have a briefing now from members in relation to Libraries NI, and I'd refer you to the clerk's memo at page 10 of the pack, the Libraries NI briefing paper, which is at page 12, and the Libraries NI response to the committee regarding transfer of functions and budget at page 17. We've got three folk from the Libraries NI with us: Irene Knox, the Chief Executive; Helen Osborne, the Director of Library Services; and Terry Heron, the Director of Business Support. So you're very welcome. Thank you. And you wish to proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Chairman, members, and thank you for the invitation to come along to the committee this morning to brief you. And it's a follow-up, I think, to correspondence between the committee and ourselves back in January in relation to two items, the transfer of functions and the budget 2016-17. We have given you a briefing paper which has updated some of the information from that initial correspondence. But I might just start off maybe by speaking about the transfer of functions side of things. With the proposed dissolution of DCAL as a result of the Department's bill, responsibilities for Libraries and I will transfer to the Department for Communities. And we've been aware for some time that that is the case. The DCAL Permanent Secretary has briefed Chief Executives and other staff, senior staff in the ALBs on several occasions in relation to the work that's ongoing in relation to the establishment of the new department. We've also been represented by Helen Osborne and some of her other staff at a co-design workshop that was organised by DCAL back last September, at which there was discussion as to how DCAL ALBs could contribute, particularly to the development of the Department for Communities' approach to social policy. We firmly believe that the Public Library Service can make a significant contribution to the Department for the Communities. Members of this committee are very well aware libraries are a valued and trusted resource in communities. They're at the heart of communities, providing space and opportunities to learn and to connect, and they are held in very high regard by the public. They are shared public spaces, community hubs, free at the point of access, with dedicated and professional staff who know their communities and who are trusted by them to provide help and support, no matter what people's background is or what their circumstances are, to enable people to access knowledge, information and ideas and open up a whole world of opportunities for people. We are about encouraging a love of reading as the basis for developing literacy skills, and that's a foundation for success in education and employment, and an important gateway to social and economic participation. We already offer a range of programmes which contribute to social and economic well-being, and many of these programmes are delivered in partnership with other organisations in the statutory and voluntary sector, with which we have memoranda of understanding, and in fact some of those organisations will also be in the new Department for Communities. So we think there is potential for those partnerships to be extended to help to deliver more joined-up approaches to service delivery in all communities, and particularly in those that are disadvantaged. And we've been doing a lot of work in disadvantaged and rural communities over the last number of years. I think an important point to remember as well is that government has invested considerably in our buildings and our vehicles over the last few years, as well as in our IT infrastructure. That means that every library now, for example, has fast broadband connections and free Wi-Fi, and that's something which has been proven to be particularly valuable in rural communities where there are particular issues in many instances around broadband availability. And I think another important aspect is that recent research that DCAL has carried out has confirmed that 89% of the population in Northern Ireland live within 2 miles of a branch library or a mobile library stop. So the library network, we think, is a tremendous resource, and there is, in our view, the potential for them to be used by a range of other organisations, including those that will be in the new Department for Communities, as a local access point for a range of citizen-focused services, a kind of one-stop shop approach. So it's with all that in mind that in developing our new draft corporate plan for 2016 to 2020 and our 16-17 business plan, we've taken the opportunity to revise our vision and to revise our mission and establish corporate goals and objectives to reflect clearly the contribution that the public library service can make, does make and will continue to make to the lives of individuals and communities. And I've provided the committee with details of that proposed vision and mission and corporate goals and strategic objectives as Annex A to our briefing paper. And you will see in that we have 3 front-facing service-oriented goals: supporting literacy, promoting love of reading, contributing to social and community well-being, and promoting economic well-being. And then there are 2 enabling goals which are about supporting and developing our people and delivering high-quality services. And when you look at the high-level objectives that our board has agreed to in terms of those service-oriented goals, they include such things as obviously fostering a love of reading, particularly with children, because that's our core business. But there is a very strong link between, very strong evidence linking reading for pleasure and educational outcomes. We're also looking at libraries as community hubs, promoting them as community hubs which facilitate access to a wide range of services. And we have targets for providing information programmes and services that contribute to health and well-being, community cohesion, increasing understanding of our shared cultural heritage, supporting digital inclusion, enhancing information literacy skills, developing financial capability and enhancing employability, all of which is about contributing to community, social and economic well-being of communities and individuals. And then our draft business plan has much more detailed targets around all of those. So the plan, our draft corporate plan and our draft business plan have now been agreed by our board, and they're currently with the department for approval as part of the process. So if I might move on, Chairman, just very briefly to speak about the budget 2016-17. Obviously our ability to realise the goals and objectives to their full extent is largely dependent on the level of resourcing that will be available in 16-17 and in subsequent years. And as indicated to you in the briefing paper, at the end of December, DCAL commissioned savings delivery plans based on a reduction of 5.7% against the baseline budget for 15-16. Now that equates to 1.677 million. However, we also have an unavoidable pressure of £220,000 as a result of government's decision to end the National Insurance Contracting Out rebate in April of this year. And as far as we know, we're the only ALB and DCAL to which this contracting out issue applies. And it's because our staff are members of NILGOS pension scheme. In addition, we've factored into the plans an inflationary pressure of £246,000. So when those additional pressures are taken into account, the actual savings that we have to make in 16-17 are £2.143 million, which equates to 7.28% of the 15-16 budget. In developing the savings delivery plans, we've sought to protect the existing library network as far as possible. recognising that it is a valuable and valued resource at the heart of communities, and the potential that we believe exists for it to be and to have a significant contribution in the new department. But given the extent of the savings that have to be found, it's inevitable that there will be implications for frontline services. So those savings delivery plans are currently with the Minister for consideration, and we're awaiting a response in relation to them. Chair, that's all I'd want to say at this stage, but we're very happy to take any questions.
Okay. I'll just ask at the start there, you mentioned about memorandum of understanding and you talked about the voluntary sector, I think. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, we have memorandums of understanding with both statutory agencies and some voluntary agencies.
All right, okay.
We have a memorandum of understanding, for example, with DEL, which is around the provision of job clubs in libraries, targeting obviously people who are unemployed. And I think last year, about maybe 35 of our libraries ran, in conjunction with jobs and benefits offices, local job clubs. Mm-hmm. We have a memorandum of understanding with DE, which is around services for children, and the contribution that reading can make, obviously, to educational. We have a memorandum of understanding with Macmillan Cancer around providing information and signposting for people. So all of our libraries now have Macmillan Cancer information stands, and Macmillan have, for example, done some training for our staff in helping to signpost people to other organisations. We are working with Invest in I in relation to them using our premises, particularly in more rural areas, to access people locally. We also have a memorandum of understanding with DARD, which is about services in rural areas. And, for example, DARD did provide us this year with some additional, this last couple of years actually, with some additional funding, which enabled us to roll out our Health in Mind programme into rural areas. And they're very keen on our programme because of, for example, our libraries have very fast broadband now, which is much better than many farmers would have. And there's a big push on for farmers doing a lot of their forms online, and we can provide help with giving them skills and so on in that. We have a memorandum of understanding with U3A, which is about where U3A will use our premises, and we will work with them on a whole range of things. We have a memorandum of understanding with Volunteer Now. So there's quite a range of partnerships that we work with in terms of delivery of services.
And in terms of the other departments like BE and DARD, do they contribute financially?
DARD has given us some funding.
What sort of scale?
I think it was about 20,000 last year. Now, it's not a huge amount of money, but every little bit counts in these situations. We haven't had any additional funding from BE or from DEL. It's more of they use our... There's a kind of... In those cases, it's about us helping to achieve our outcomes and agenda, and them also, and it's a kind of joint approach to the delivery of a particular programme or whatever. For example, with DEL, by bringing people who are unemployed into the library for job clubs, we also have the opportunity to talk to those people about what the library service can do for them and help them to join up.
I can see certainly that there's a synergy about those things, and it is mutually beneficial. But I am surprised that in view of the contribution that you rightly say libraries make to education and educational outcomes, that the Department of Education, which has a very, very large budget in comparison with DCAL, can find money for all sorts of things but hasn't managed to find tuppence to support libraries. I think that's something that maybe the committee would want to reflect on after you've completed your presentation. Okay, Councillor Hoshin.
Thank you, Chair. Morning.
Morning.
Just on behalf of my colleague who's not here today, just to welcome the opening of Carnlough Library yesterday.
Yes.
I know he wanted to pass on his thanks for that. Carnlough, like many other libraries, are essentially rural libraries, and it's a matter of fact that 46% of farmers last year filled in their forms for single file payment online, some of them through libraries in rural areas, which aren't best served by broadband, so I'm glad of that. The new Department of Communities, is there an opportunity there, Irene, for any new partnerships through that because of the wider remit of it?
Libraries NI we've always been very open to partnerships with any other organisation, statutory, voluntary, community or whoever, where there may be mutual benefits. I do think that there will be opportunities in the new department, but obviously I think it will take a little while for that department to settle and for things to come together. I think the fact that we already do work, for example, with Dell, we can build on that. But I think there will be, I would hope there will be opportunities as well, given that the whole issue about welfare benefits and people making application for welfare benefits in the longer term online and so on. And given that our service, given that government has invested in our IT infrastructure and that all our libraries now provide public access computers, fast broadband, as we've talked about, free Wi-Fi, there is an opportunity, I think, to use that kind of approach to help people who may be unemployed, who may not have the resources themselves either to buy a computer, to pay broadband, to actually use our service to access that. And also perhaps to give them the skills, because a big part of the work that we do is around digital inclusion. It's about helping people to get online in the first place and helping them to navigate that whole sort of process. So I think I would hope there will be real opportunities to do something there.
How structured is that that assistance and help?
Well, we run two programmes at the moment. We have what's called GOT IT, which is a very basic programme, one-to-one, delivered by our staff to an individual member of the public, 3 sessions, which is really, here's how you get online, here's how you set up an email account, here's how you use Google or whatever. And then we do what's called Go On, and actually this is where we do get some money actually from DFP as well, which is to deliver a Go On programme, which is about taking people a bit further and helping them to, for example, access the NI Direct website, bank online, so some of the more tasks that many of us will take for granted, shop online, that kind of thing. And that's a programme, and we offer, there are various modules that people can come on for that. So there's a whole range of things there.
Are all the staff trained to deliver?
The Go On programme is not every member does that. Every member of staff will do the basics, but then we have staff in a team who will help to deliver the Go On. Right. I think the issue for us is, and this is where we would like to get more funding, is because we have been losing staff over the last number of years around voluntary redundancy, those teams that deliver and develop that kind of work are getting smaller, and it's becoming more difficult actually to meet the demand, because there is a big demand for that kind of work.
Just on a separate issue, the 1.6 million reduction, is that going to have any impact on opening hours or stock purchase?
Yes, we have. We've made the decision this year that we do not want to close any libraries. We can't close because we believe they're very important. But we are going to have to reduce the opening hours of. Our plan at the moment is the opening hours of the 14 biggest libraries, because we, as you know from last year's budget, we carried out a review and we reduced opening hours right across the library network with effect from last November. We don't feel we can go back to some of those smaller libraries and reduce the hours anymore, because it gets to a stage where if you're not open at least 18 hours a week, there's no point in being open almost. But we are saying that one of the areas that we are looking at, and I emphasise these are plans at the moment which are with the department, so there's no action has been taken around any of this yet. We're looking at the 14 biggest libraries which are currently open either 54 hours or 50 hours a week, and we're looking at bringing all of those down to 45 hours.
Okay.
And we are again looking at reducing our stock budget.
Right. And just finally, Chair, Libraries Day was on February the 6th. I was just wondering how many, I know I tweeted and Facebook did, but I wonder how many others did.
Sorry, you might know the figure, Sally.
I don't have the figure. What I do know is that on our Flickr page there are 7 pages of photographs for Libraries Day. I didn't actually count the number of photos.
I know a number of members were involved in that, and it was. I think on the national page, it's certainly given Libraries NI. Our presence there is certainly, I think, punching above our weight as far as right across the UK is concerned. So, thank you to everybody.
Good initiative.
Thank you to everybody, and lots of members of the public and children and so on. It's been really good. Thank you, and thank you for your support for that, members.
Thank you,
What was you recording?
Thanks very much for your presentation. In terms of cutting frontline services, that's a big concern. And what else can be looked at in terms of trying to avoid reducing it in hours?
Well, we actually are cutting other things as well, which aren't frontline services. There are a number of areas in which we're looking at. First of all, in terms of actually 2.143 million we're going to have to find next year. Almost half of that, in fact just more than half of that, is coming already from savings that we are making this year in terms of the voluntary exit scheme, because we lost 19 staff this year. We also reduced opening hours this year. So the savings that are being made from that, which were only partial this year, are flowing through to next year. So 1.1 million of that 2.1 million is already coming from that. We're looking at taking well over 200,000 out of administration, travel, those sort of back office. We're looking at taking over 200,000 out of our maintenance budget, and we're looking at the stock budget. So we're taking an awful lot out of other services that we've already taken out of year on year for the last, basically since Libraries NI was established. So it gets to the stage where actually our back office is very, very lean, and actually becomes a concern, because you can get to the stage where it becomes too lean and you become too reliant on 1 or 2 people, and if somebody goes off sick or whatever, then you have real difficulties. I think we have come to where we can come as far as that's concerned. So yes, we're talking about taking money out of our stock budget, but the vast majority of their savings is coming from the flow through from this year and those other services that are back office, that aren't frontline. But I don't believe we can take any more out of those, certainly this year. I don't think we can. We've tried to minimise absolutely what we're doing on the front line, but I can't see how we can't do something there.
There's nothing else.
We've looked at absolutely everything, and Terry might be able to come in with more detail.
Perhaps just to emphasise that in previous years, Libraries has been protected by the Minister in terms of cuts. This year, because I think we're the only ALB that are facing this pressure arising from the pension arrangements, the change in the pension arrangements, that's costing us an extra £220,000, which no other ALB in DCAL is faced with. And it's truly that there, plus the inflationary pressures, plus the 1.6 million cut, means that we have to look at all services, including frontline services. We have made the case to the department that if we were funded for that unavoidable increase in national insurance, which is something that only Libraries is faced with, we could certainly minimise any impact on frontline services if that happened.
So you're going to reduce the hours of some of the biggest libraries? Did you say 14?
14 biggest libraries.
14. Where are they roughly based?
I can give you the libraries. The 14 biggest libraries are Ballymena, Bangor, Belfast Central, Carrickfergus, Coleraine, Derry Central, Dungannon, Enniskillen, Finicky, Glengormley, Lisburn, Lurgan, Newry and Doma. They're all open at the moment, either 54 hours or 50 hours, so we're talking about bringing them down to 45 hours.
Okay. So would that involve a staff reduction?
Yeah, that's where the vast majority of our costs are frontline staff. and if we're reducing hours, then there is obviously the voluntary exit scheme this year again, and the department has told us that there is funding for voluntary exit. So we would be looking to, if and I would emphasise that this is all if at the moment, because there are no decisions have been made yet as far as our budget's concerned. But if the budget is as we've been told to plan for, as far as savings delivery plans are concerned, then we would be looking at those libraries and looking at reducing the hours, reducing the staffing levels as well.
Right, okay. You said about your stock budget. So is that where you would buy new materials?
Yes. You want to speak for the stock?
Yes, and that's where we buy new materials across all the formats and for every type of customer. So children's books, fiction and non-fiction for adults, large print, talking books, online resources, e-books, e-magazines, and it really is the lifeblood of the service. And the challenge with a reduced budget is, where do you cut? Because in order to maintain levels of use or minimise the reduction, you need to buy the popular, well-used material. But actually, some of the material that is less well-used and is actually more expensive, such as large print, such as talking books, such as material in minority languages, is really important for different reasons as opposed to the level of use. And it's also, I think, a particularly challenging time to reduce the stock budget because we're experiencing the greatest demand I've ever experienced in my career for the range of formats, because we have people who want everything online, but we can't forget those people yet who don't use online, who actually really value the large print novels and so on. As society changes, we won't need to provide quite as broad a range of formats, but currently we would ideally be providing a novel in perhaps 5 or 6 different formats to meet the different demands.
Sure. Can I ask this is a question not related to the whole budget issue, but it's just one about the way the libraries are organised. The stock that would exist in the library, I use 2 libraries and another one a bit, but generally use Falls and Suffolk. And where I go, the choice hasn't changed. Now, I know you can order books, but I haven't found that works very successfully for me. And I just find that whenever I go back, the shelves are just have, over the past few years, the same choices. Do you rotate your stock? Because I wonder, in other libraries that I have never been in, do they have materials that I'd be interested in, but I don't go there. Do you rotate your stock, I'm saying, to refresh? Because it's a way of not having to spend, but making the choices more wide and more available.
We do rotate stock, not children's books, because the demand is similar everywhere and they wear out quite quickly. But certainly the fiction and non-fiction, we do rotate. Not as much as we would like to, because that simply isn't possible with the resources available. But we do try to keep the stock refreshed by rotating it. So I'm disappointed to hear what you said. The way our purchases work is the larger the library, the more new stock it gets. So libraries in a similar band, say our 40-hour libraries, would have broadly similar stock, but we do try to rotate it to keep it fresh. So maybe that's something we need to look at some more.
Thank you for the feedback, because I think that's important.
That's an important point, so thank you for that. Yeah.
How much is the target figure per person?
The figure in the public library standards is £2.25 per capita.
Right. And we're getting at the moment?
Well, this year
we're approaching £2 this year, but our next year is to reduce that down to £1.50.
So it would be down to £1.50 per capita as opposed to £2.25, which is 2/3 of what it should be, ideally. So we're 1/3 below that. It just seems to me, and we'll come back to it, that there's need for some programme for government commitment around this, or some sort of programme for government approach to it, whereby if other departments with huge budgets, particularly DE and DARD, and you're only getting £20,000, that's
minuscule.
thank you very much, minuscule. I mean, that's, and those are the same ministers there from the same party as the culture minister, and they still can't manage to put anything in. That's incredible. David Hilditch.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for your presentation. Just on the sort of the building stock and maintenance and things like that, and I do welcome the Farnlock opening yesterday, though that's in conjunction with the council. There was a sort of a joint thing, but I've seen in the old constituency in the southern part as well as Farnlock in the north, the refurbishment of like Carrickfergus and whatnot. But is there any other properties you have which would have fallen into the likes of the Carnlock where the future is in doubt of the property, and not so much the service as such, but is there issues relating to property and maintenance that may come under stress at this stage in relation to budgets?
I think the point, one of the points is that there has been significant investment in
Yes.
a lot of our libraries over the last while, and that's very, very welcome. We do have a few business cases in with the department at the moment. One of which is Coleraine Library. Coleraine Library is a very good library, very busy library, but it's a 1960s, 70s building, an iconic building which is now listed. But it's leaking like mad, and
Listed but leaking. Yeah.
but it's and we have a business case in for that because we do, and it also has problems because of the way it's built with disability access. There's a major issue around disability access to it. We're also looking at Lisburn Road in Belfast because it's again in a very it's in a lovely old house with wonderful stables at the back, but actually is not really very suitable for a library, and we have a business case for that as well. So, but apart from that, and obviously Belfast Central, which is currently with the Department of Finance and Personnel, our library stock is in pretty good condition because of the investment and because of the money that we have put in over the last number of years in terms of keeping it in that way, not just through capital funding but through planned maintenance. But we do need to continue.
But if you do have cutbacks in the plan,
and that's the issue.
Risk the building.
That is exactly that is the issue. If your planned maintenance is really about preventing something happening, and you can do without a lot of planned maintenance maybe in the short term, but the longer it goes on, the more you have to put into response maintenance then to deal with the issues. And I think that there gets to be a value for money issue then around, you're actually spending more than you would have initially in terms of keeping the building up to scratch.
Thank you.
I'll come to Leslie and I would just ask, if we're getting 2/3 just of the amount per capita on books, what would the total cost be of lifting it up to the proper figure of £2.25?
It would be another £1.5 million.
£1.5 million a year would solve the problem for all of our libraries right across Northern Ireland, and yes, in terms of stock. That's good. Thank you. Leslie Craig.
Thanks, Chair. A few points, folks. Some you've touched on already, but first of all, the contracting out one seems to me to be a very sound argument to make. Your hopes are pinned on a bid. Will this be, do you anticipate this to be June monitoring signed?
We don't know. We've been talking to the department. Terry's been talking with the department about it.
We really haven't had any great feedback about it yet. We would like to have it in place at the start of the year so that we can plan accordingly.
Of course.
Because if we get it halfway through the year, that disrupts all their plans. In a sense, we are being penalised this year compared to other ALBs and DCAL because we're the only ones facing this pressure. And if this bid was funded, it would get us back to a level playing field at least.
That seems to be logical, and that's maybe a dangerous word to use in connection with the budgets. But if, in fact, it sort of drifts on to June, the whole scenario has changed in June, as you know. Priorities will be re-established, new ministers will be there, and it could be a vain hope.
And it will mean that our plans in place for reduction in frontline services need to proceed. Currently, their only plans are not approved. We're still hoping for some feedback on them. But if we don't get that, then we will have to immediately start planning for cutback.
Okay, now again, you've touched on that. What do actual cutbacks mean? Does that mean that staff are laid off for portions of the week? Do they then have to apply for benefits?
No, we wouldn't go down that route at all. What we've done in the past is we've always, when we've had to reduce, we've always sought volunteers for redundancy, and only volunteers.
Is there a limit to how far that can happen?
But there is a limit to how far that can go. I would like to think that we would not have to do, well, I would certainly not be proposing that we do anything other than seek volunteers. Now, it may be that those volunteers are not in the right places, but what we've done in the past, and that has happened in the past, and what we've done in the past is we've worked with staff then to redeploy people and to negotiate, moves and so on. And it is a very complex process. We've actually reduced opening hours now on 3 separate occasions already, and as a result of that have been talking to staff basically constantly about changing their timetables, perhaps changing their locations and so on. And that's a very difficult process for people, because everybody has they have personal circumstances, families, caring responsibilities and so on. And we're coming back to them year on year saying, I'm sorry, this year, you're working in X library, but next year we need you to do half of that time in Y library because of where we're going. So it's very unsettling for staff.
Well, that's the human face of it, but the reality is that the overhead is still fixed.
Yes.
So it's inefficient.
Sorry, it's what?
It's inefficient, therefore.
It's inefficient.
You're paying for heat, you're paying for rate, you're paying for everything else.
Yeah. Yes, and one of the things we want to be looking at is how do we make our libraries more accessible to other organisations. The difficulty is if we're cutting opening hours, we're cutting off the opportunity for that to happen as well. And we are looking at alternative ways of perhaps, but that requires investment to be able to do that. But what we would really like to do is we really would like to be in a position of, there are 96 libraries right across Northern Ireland, shared spaces in places where there may be not any other public building, government funded building. There is an opportunity, we believe, for other services to use those buildings, help to contribute to the overheads. In terms
That's
of
important, but you have to underline that.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah. Help to contribute to those overheads. But actually then they can provide their services locally in that building, and give the public access to services, maybe using our IT facilities, using our meeting rooms, using the space that's available. And it becomes a shared overhead, but shared access then as well.
Community facility.
A community hub,
sense,
a community facility.
You touched on the book rotation. How actually does it work?
Our computer system throws up, has parameters put in it that will say a book has been in this library for X amount of time, and a list is produced and the staff identify those books that have been there for X amount of time.
And what is X?
Then, well, it depends on the category of book.
What does it range from?
I don't have a great level of detail, but we would rarely move anything on. We wouldn't normally move anything on in less than a year. Some books may continue to issue well for a couple of years, particularly popular fiction. So we would, the more popular the book, the longer the period before it would move on. Yeah. Because really, you wanted it to be outread. Yeah. Sorry?
It reflects the degree of use.
Yes.
Turnover, if you like, or whatever.
Yes.
So it's some poor people at the end of the line for popular books mightn't see them for at least a year, maybe never.
But the initial allocation means every library gets a share of the popular material in relation to the size of the library.
How do you know it's popular at the beginning?
We have a lot of data about how well certain authors or certain genre issues. So it's an expectation.
I'm sure if you want, we can provide you with information
because
at that level of detail.
I do have a thing about it. Unless you're getting, new books in the libraries, there's a gap. That's really what I'm concerned about. If in fact, say smaller libraries can be larger ones that don't have sort of new books, they'll cease coming.
Absolutely.
I think, and I
that's
think
the danger.
I think one of the issues as well is, we start off at the beginning of the year with our stock budget cut, so we have to make plans as to how we will spend that amount of money. What tends to happen now with publications is that they tend to do very short print runs. So if you don't buy when it's in print, you've missed it. And that can be an issue if we don't know at the start of the year. Here's how much money we absolutely have to spend. And one of the things is, it is great because we do sometimes get extra money during the year from the department and so on for stock. But sometimes that's difficult as well because actually the stuff that you really wanted to buy is no longer available. So you can, and it can work particularly with heritage material where something can be published because we collect anything to do with heritage in Northern Ireland and Ireland, because that's just part of our job. But you might miss something because you don't have any money at that particular time.
Two final quick points. What about Eurofunds or Carnegie Trust or anything like that?
Carnegie don't provide recurrent money for something like stock. In fact, we work with Carnegie UK Trust, and actually Carnegie UK Trust funded a project that we're involved in this year. They have what they call library partners, who there are really 7 of them across the UK, 7 individuals who put forward a proposal, many proposals to Carnegie, for something innovative that they would like to see happening. And one of our members of staff was actually very lucky this year and was successful in getting one of those awards. Now, it's not a huge amount of money, it was £15,000, but it has allowed that member of staff to do work for us on what we're calling Rub-a-Dub Hub, which is going to be an aspect of our website, which is focused on helping to give parents the skills to work with their children around how do you read a book to your child, what are the kinds of books that are best for children of various ages and so on. In fact, the project is being launched in March, and I have a feeling that members of the CAL committee, if they haven't already, will be getting an invitation to the launch, and you'll be very welcome to come along to that.
What about Eurofunds then, the bigger pot?
We haven't actually managed to access any Eurofunds.
We've benefited from various funding for various cross-border projects that were funded through Europe over the years. Normally fairly small scale, but some of them quite exciting and innovative. But we haven't found a way for Eurofunds to actually provide those core services which we're talking about in the savings delivery plans.
You have to package it though to suit.
Yeah.
We did.
The final point, you mentioned there the stables in the Belfast Library. Did you factor that into your considerations when you're thinking of the mobile libraries? No?
Thank you. Could just, William would be nice just to ask, how did you arrive at the £20,000 figure with DARD?
The funding from DARD came from what they call their TRIPSY framework, which is tackling rural poverty and social isolation. And it was really it was to extend our Health in Mind provision in each year 8 rural libraries, and that was the cost of doing so. So it was for a very specific provision. They are reviewing the TRIPSY framework, and if and when a new framework is announced, we would certainly be looking to bid into that in future. But obviously that's for the future.
Would it be possible to put, it would be something of an estimate, at best an estimate, of the value that you give to other departments in terms of people filling in? So how many farmers do these single farm payments online in a library? Is there a way of getting even a vague idea of that? How many tractors are parked?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. I suppose one of the strengths of the library service is that we don't ask people why they're using the library,
sure.
and that's why many of them come. But we will be doing a customer survey in the autumn, so maybe we could use that to get some indications around
It would
aspects
really
like that.
strengthen, I think, the argument for both education and Guard putting money at a really meaningful level in, if there was some estimate of that. William?
Yeah, Chair. Mr. Cree raises an interesting point in terms of Europe. If we weren't paying £55 million a day to Europe, perhaps could buy some new books for libraries. Can I just ask, and you mentioned the Central Library and DFP. Could you just give us a wee update on where that sits?
The Belfast Central Library business case has been approved by DCAL and is currently with DFP. So we're awaiting a response. We've had some feedback from DFP, which has been. It's usually an iterative process. You know, they will ask us some questions. We've provided them with the information. They were very minor questions. Some officials from DFP have actually been to Belfast Central Library to see it for themselves. So we're hopeful, but we haven't heard anything.
And you're not aware because you haven't heard anything of a timescale?
No, no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Rosie McCorley?
Just Margaret, I just wanted to add that I don't want to appear that my comments were negative, because I have excellent experience of the libraries. Facilities are brilliant and I always enjoy going there, and I just think it's a pity if the hours are going to have to be reduced, but I didn't mean to sound negative.
No, we appreciate the feedback. Thank you for that.
Thank you indeed very much, and we appreciate the presentation on the engagement.
Thank you, and thank you to the committee, because this may, hopefully, well, no, not hopefully, this may be the last time that we're before you, and we've always appreciated actually the opportunity to talk to you, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Are there any actions you wish to take in the light of the presentation and the questions and the answers?
I think, Chair, that bid they made, I think that really deserves to be looked at rather than allowed to drift to the junior.
About the national insurance, yes. Okay.
So I think, Chairman, £1.5 million in the grand scheme of government isn't a large amount of money. You know, I've heard members in my time here, both in this committee and in the House, from across Northern Ireland, urban and rural, expressing concerns about their libraries, whether the libraries are retained, the services that are in them, the hours they're opened, the publications that are available, and so on. And, you know, given the fact that this department spends so much money on what are pet projects for the Minister, and what is the North West, which is actually now, I think the last time I looked about it, at least about probably a quarter of Northern Ireland, stretching to be a third of it, in terms of how this department defines it. Really, you know, it is simply not good enough. You know, when we have cuts to the arts, they're simply seen off because extra money is given, not because there was any sort of review within the department. And I do think this is the most basic in terms of. I represent one of the most deprived constituencies in the United Kingdom, never mind Northern Ireland, with high levels of poor educational attainment, both at primary school and post-primary school levels. And people can talk about these things, but actually if they don't invest in them, then how do we address them? And there needs to be a joined-up approach. And one of the best ways of having a joined-up approach is for the Department of Education to actually work with DCAL, who have currently, or the new communities, for communities when it comes into play, to address this issue. You have an underfunding from DCAL because funding is going elsewhere, and you have no funding from education into this situation. And I have to say, I just don't think that's good enough, and I do think there is a need for the Department of Education to step up to the plate around this issue and actually support libraries, because you can't talk about these things and if you don't invest to address them, and this is a small amount of money really in terms of the investment that will be coming, whether from the department itself out of its current budget or extra monies coming from education.
The team Leslie's point first then about the national insurance that we write to the department, Leslie, on that issue.
Yes, they're the only one of ALB affected. I think it's unfair.
Members agreeable to that?
Agreed.
Thank you. And then picking up on William's point there about the educational benefits that flow from libraries, I suppose there's actually a point there, although the books, the sort of books that you would require for further and higher education are probably not, they tend to be more, yes, university library, they would be more specialist. But the larger number of people would be through DE.
But for the job clubs in town.
Yes. Okay. Should we write to other departments that mention that there's if there's an MOU with Dale, we should be writing to them and DE and DARD regarding a reasonable, realistic contribution.
And social development.
I've got a Chair. I have a list.
He's got a list of all.
I've got a list of all the ones
relevant
that
departments.
Irene
if
mentioned.
we work with his list of all the departments,
Chair, the other thing that Irene mentioned was they may have some figures on how some of this works, so it might be useful to write to them to get some quantification too. I think they'll certainly know about the number of job clubs in particular libraries, and they're able to give a definite figure for TRIPSI. And the DFP Go On programme.
Could we also maybe in that context write to the department and ask what approaches have been made to these other departments in terms of additional resources to see how they've been pressing them on it?
That's fine, but time's of the essence.
Oh, yes. Sooner we get this meeting over, he'll be away to his computer and put the letter off. The email will be away. Okay. Let's get it done while we're meeting. Okay, that moves us on to inquiry into issues around emergency exiting plans, including their impact on stadium capacity for the redeveloped Casement Park. Point 1, just to get it here, is copy of the Sport NI correspondence to DCAL. That's at page 22, and that's a letter of, let me get back here,
March 2012.
March 2012.
From Dominic Walsh to Rosalie.
From Dominic Walsh to Rosalie Flanagan, yeah. And just to explain the background, is did we get this before? Have we had that letter before?
No, the letter itself, no. The SIPFA was a draft. SIPFA was obviously what was current in the Sport and I at the time. Dominic Walsh was there. We've had the final version. His version, I think, is late 2012. We've had the final early 2013.
So this is the handover letter?
Effectively.
Yeah.
The SIPFA, as I say, was the analysis. Members may recall this. It was the analysis of Sport and I that was done as a forerunner and feeding into the ALB review. So members have looked at the final version of that. What he sent is actually an earlier draft. There isn't a huge amount of difference, but we had the final version. As I say, members looked at that and it fed into a lot of the issues around the ALB review, and then has been picked up again with the current work that is being done within Sport and I with the IELT.
What's the IELT?
I knew someone would ask that. Interim Executive Liaison Team. That's Arthur Scott and his colleagues who've come in and sort of are looking at full corporate issues. So it's there. This is an older version with the letter between the Rosalie Flanagan and Dominic Walsh. As you say, Chair, it's just prior to the project moving from Sport and I into the department. It's kind of like, effectively, if you want to put it, a sort of State of the Union almost.
Okay, we also have at point 4.2, the draft SIPFA report on the Governance Review and Implementation Programme for Sport and I. That's at page 25. Those documents were referred to by Dominic Walsh during his recent briefing to the committee and forwarded by him for the committee's reference. They previously received the final version of the SIPFA paper from January 2013. Okay. Then at point 4.3, there is a copy of an email from Carl Southern to Paul Scott dated 30th of April 2013. Mr. Scott indicated he was not sure whether this had been provided to the committee previously. However, it was provided and is on the SharePoint with the other
it was in the original
papers.
It was in the original bundle.
Okay.
We checked.
That's the from Carl Southern to Paul Scott, copy to Noel Malloy. There's mention somewhere in that to address the minister. Is there a reference somewhere? Is there not there about briefing the minister?
Third paragraph.
Third paragraph. This option must be explored in detail so that Noel and the minister are in a position to address the residents' concerns and clearly articulate the rationale for the stadium exit strategy. That's exit strategy rather than emergency exit strategy. Okay. So members will recall that the committee agreed in publishing evidence provided for the inquiry, subject to confidentiality and data protection processes and procedures. The Department has indicated its content for this bundle to be published. There are approximately 2,300 pages, and this is marked as Decal Bundle 1 on the SharePoint.
Chair, there's a hard copy list for members in front of them. It's mostly minutes, risk registers. As you say, there's the department provided a list and they've numbered that, but that has now been cleared for publication. It's about shy of 2,500 pages. So we start trying to publish that. Because, as you know, we now publish ourselves. It just takes a little bit longer to do that. It's a bit more.
Okay.
It's a lot of work, put it that way.
The committee will post these documents on the website as part of the inquiry evidence. It was agreed that members would be informed first about what was to be scheduled to be published. Brings us then to matters arising. Point 5.1. We have the correspondence tracker at page 54 of the pack.
Chair, the one I would say that the update in Creative Europe will fall off because Sean and Neely did send us details, so that was just a last sort of flag up on that one before we take it off because it's the information has now been received. The others, we have reissued correspondence with a plea, if you like, for delivery of it within the very short time frame we have left. And obviously, as soon as we get that, what we'll do is we'll send it immediately to members as well as having the subsequent pack, just so the members have seen it. But we are doggedly pursuing that.
Okay. Point 5.2, the correspondence at page 55 from the Arts Council Northern Ireland regarding national lottery funding. Following the draft executive budget briefing by departmental officials, the committee agreed to ask Arts Council Northern Ireland Sport NI for details of organisations that are funded solely by national lottery monies and how the new funding might affect them. Arts Council provided a list of 77 organisations that receive this funding. They were concerned that the 16-17 budget would impact on the remaining organisations, Therefore, they introduced an annual funding programme to protect all organisations.
Chair, if I can just remind members how that works. The list of the 77s on page 56, the way Arts Council funding was divided before, there was exchequer funding and then there was lottery funding, and some organisations who were only lottery funded weren't experiencing the same cuts as those that were funded because the lottery funding wasn't changing in the same way. Now what they've done is a kind of balanced blend, if you like, so that all organisations, and there's some 100 and I think about 110 or so, so you had sort of the 77 who were lottery, and then you had almost 40, I think, who were exchequer. Now that's blended so that everybody, if you like, feels the same pain whenever there's a reduction in budget. But the list on page 56 is the original 77 that were just lottery funded.
Okay. Point 53, page 59 in your pack, there's a similar correspondence from Sport NI. The body has provided information on their organisations and programmes funded by national lottery monies. To protect frontline services from the budget cuts of 5.7%, reductions to administrative processes have been made. This has led to the Athlete Investment Programme being funded from lottery funds, not exchequer funds. And the Everybody Active Small Grants Programme is funded by the exchequer rather than the lottery. This swap has led to the forecast spend in the Athlete Investment Programme remaining at the 15-16 level of £1 million, and the Everybody Active Small Grants Programme has increased by £200,000 on the 15-16 figure to now £700,000 for 16-17.
Chair, the way there's just a slightly different situation. It's a bit more complex, but the blending for them means that they've been able to push money into the front line. There were concerns that there would be cuts to the athlete investment programme, and obviously, in an Olympic year and so on, that would have been a concern. So the money will now be pushed with the blending towards those front lines, so that there will actually still be the programmes going on and getting into communities and so on as well. So that's how they've prioritised and changed it, but the cuts will be felt elsewhere in back administrative processes.
Okay.
Which is correct, no?
Referring members also then to the hard copy table response from the Minister regarding the Elver mortality event at Kathleen's Falls Dam in Ballyshannon. The Minister indicates that the daily checks of the traps were made, including on weekends and public holidays. We simply note that.
Great relief to the Elvers and their parents.
Okay. Brings us to correspondence. Point 61. We have the Clerk's memo at page 62. A second, sorry.
Chair, that memo is pretty short, just highlighting the embargo which ended yesterday at 1 minute past midnight. Members will be aware the PAC have now released this report, and I think there's a fair amount of media coverage over the last couple of days, and members are clearly very aware of the background. This is the copy of the report, and it's for members to consider. And
are there any comments or observations that members have in regard to the report, if you've read it? It is a very damning report.
Chairman, I suppose what we would look for is something that we keep saying is assurances that this cannot happen again, and there are effective measures put in place to give us all some sort of assurance that the processes and procedures that exist will not allow such to happen again, and that lessons are learnt and effective measures put into place right across the various organisations to ensure that this type of thing will never happen.
I think, though, Vice Chair, you can have a situation where you can have the best systems in the world, but if someone has a duty and doesn't carry it out properly, in terms of departmental monitoring of arms length bodies, because goodness knows what took place. We don't know what transpired at meetings, the regular accountability meetings that there would have been between the chief executive of the events company and the department. There must have been Yeah, there must have been meetings, every quarter, presumably, with the company, and the senior official in DCAL who would have been holding those meetings. What did they do at those meetings? What interrogation was there of the finances of the organisation? It also surprised me because if you saw something like a racetrack being set up for one day, you think alarm bells would be ringing. Why would that happen? It just seems that everybody was asleep at that stage.
But Chair, if the proper process and procedures are there, and like audit, evaluation, authorisation, all those things come to mind. If they're there and there are checks and balances, and people that have to get things authorised, approved before they proceed, then if everything is in place, it should be in place, and there's actually a body of people here, a committee as such that overseen all of this. Obviously there were gaps, there were non-compliances throughout the whole procedure, and as a result we've had a major failure, and it all comes to a head and embarrasses so many people, and public money is wasted. Public money has been wasted, and there's little or no accountability for it. It's not acceptable, so we need to ensure that this type of thing cannot recur.
It makes the point there that this was largely done, these issues arose under direct rule, and that you had one minister handling 4 departments, which places a particular onus then on the civil servants in the department to make sure that because the minister, even if you had one minister per department, they're reliant entirely on what information is fed up to them.
Buck stops with a permanent secretary in that case.
Department.
Okay, Rosemary McCordy.
I mean, I would have the same concerns. You'd want to know what sort of business plan was put in place and what sort of process was followed, and also in general terms, whenever large projects were being built, what about the bond process? What way was that in place for this sort of thing? So it's really what safeguards are. Clearly something was wrong at that time, so what we would be wanting to safeguard is going forward into the future, that there would be lessons learned at the very least, so that the correct safeguards would be in place, and then when you have, and similar to what happened with the MAC, you would have wanted a bond from someone who was building that, or someone who's responsible for it, to stand over the work for a reasonable period of time, not a short period. So
I don't think it was necessarily the quality of the work in that case. It's different from the MAC in that regard. It was the fact that why was it being done?
Well, that's obviously a question. Yeah.
And also the fact that this is now back 7 years ago. This issue was on the agenda of this committee 7, maybe 8 years ago. Then it disappeared into the police investigation. Consultants brought in to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and it takes 8 years, and it's so long ago now. It is very different. But do members wish to take any action on it, or do we just let it sit there?
Okay.
Okay.
Well, can I just make a point, Chairman? I mean, what is going to be done with it?
Chair,
Because it's fine, and a considerable amount of public money has gone into doing the report. But my concern is that I think, except this was under direct rule, it's actually a good reason why you should never return to direct rule for those people who advocate returning to direct rule, that a minister who flies in, spends 30 nights, 30 days, whatever, looks after 4 departments, actually can't scrutinise or manage those departments. And civil servants then have field day. And to be fair, Miss McAleese, who was the chief executive of the organisation, took a serious amount of criticism at the time in the public domain, and that may well have been justified. Miss McAleese was operating to a board. There were senior civil servants in place. Were there checks and balances? And it's fine to produce a report, but what's going to be done about it?
Chair, I'm aware, I think, that PAC will be doing some follow-up. If members are agreeable, I'll talk to the PAC clerk and find out just exactly what they're doing, and then feed that back to the committee, so we know what sort of activity there is and what particularly the audit office is looking for being put into place.
If we could have that.
I liaise with
Their lead, yeah.
Yeah, if we could get that information for next
Yeah,
week.
yeah.
But I think, Chair, the lessons learned are applicable to all the organisations and government bodies and agencies. And therefore, it's important that, you know, that it is closed out with effective measures that will stop recurrence.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Point 54 we're on to now, and that is correspondence from Deputy Minister at page 33 in the tabled pack regarding the case for the Commonwealth Youth Games. This has been provided in hard copy as well.
in front of members.
Are you content to note that? Good. There is a memo at page 96 from the Head of Communications and Outreach regarding the pilot programme for the use of electronic devices by those in the public gallery. That was referred to at the opening of the meeting. Are members content to note that as well?
Agreed.
The Fisheries Bill consideration stage was debated in the Chamber on Tuesday morning, with clauses 10 to 13 of the bill relating to inland fisheries falling as expected. Point 72, invitation at page 36 in the table pack to the Minister's reception celebrating sporting success in 2015. This is scheduled for the 9th of March in the Lakeland Forum in Enniskillen, and that has been provided in hard copy.
Wednesday.
What time is that?
2 till 5. Chair. It's Wednesday the 9th, 2 till 5.
Chair, just try on that. Will we have any idea of who will be attending that?
We can ask. We have no idea at the minute, but we can ask.
Who are the recipients?
Which rally drivers?
Usually it's
Have you any particular sports in mind? That you
Motorsport, yes.
Motorsport, all
It's
right.
never mentioned here. We're very rarely mentioned.
what it will do is it'll gather up for the full sort of 2015, and we can ask. There would be a list already, I would imagine, of who's
Yeah.
coming out. So we can write to the department and ask for that. I wouldn't have thought that.
Grand, thank you.
Please let the committee office team know if you plan to attend. The forward work programme is at page 100 in the pack. Right, forward programme.
Is it one?
Yes, we
Full
are.
100.
The next one will be, this is the 25th of February. Next one is the Tuesday, you remember, at 1 o'clock. Yes, Tuesday, the 1st of March, at 1 o'clock in Parliament Buildings, as usual. In what room?
Senate.
It should be noon. Should be noon, Chair.
Should be noon.
I sent out an email yesterday to members if they can access that again and maybe even get that printed out, because it gives the Tuesdays that we've scheduled in. The Tuesdays were Tuesday the 1st at noon in the Senate, Tuesday the 8th at 10 in the Senate, and Tuesday the 15th at noon in the Senate. Tuesday the 15th is not necessarily going to be required. We've budgeted for that purely because we may have tie-up, and thinking particularly about legacy report approval.
Tuesday the 8th.
So Tuesday the 1st next week.
It's 12.
Yes, at 12 in the Senate. Tuesday the 8th at 10 in the Senate. And Tuesday the 15th at 12 in the Senate. Tuesday the 15th we might not need. And we don't meet on Thursday the 17th, St Patrick's Day, because we're still here. And we provide lunch on the lunchtime day.
And so next Thursday,
Is that 12 o'clock slot? I think, Chair, might be problematic for some. For I know the land acquisition bill is up on Tuesday, so why 12 and not half 12?
To be honest, it was a case of getting the room. If what we can do is if there's problems that we can possibly slide down to 12:30. I think we have the room on that first Tuesday. We have it from 12 until probably as long as 3. So we can slide it if
members
would be
agreeable.
helpful. That's the next week.
12:30 instead of 12.
Yeah.
So Washing, is that this Tuesday coming? Tuesday coming.
Okay, 12:30.
The other thing, Chair,
12:30 be.
Yeah.
Should we say 12:30 then?
That's the third and final call, is it?
there are two.
Because you have ETI.
Yeah.
Will that?
My good colleague, Mr. Humphreys, is in the same boat,
Yeah.
but we'll do our best.
It's
half
so
past
hard to
12,
get
you will
it's
be
so hard
free
to get a
to be there.
room.
I know
So
doubt
hard to
that.
get a room.
Absolutely confident in you.
It's shocking, man.
That one is,
Come in the report like you normally do.
Chair, that Tuesday next week, we have Sport NI on the IELT, and we have the SIB, the Strategic Investment Board, on the MAC. It was quite tricky getting that.
Then, looking forward then to next Thursday, we have the Minister coming in regard to the Casement inquiry.
The Minister's office have given verbal confirmation. We still are waiting for writing on whether it's oath or affirmation. We don't know yet.
And
Still,
we'll return to that later, do we?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. That's
Chair, the other one is Mr. May has confirmed for the 10th of March. So the Thursday meetings are as normal, 3rd of March, 10th of March, not the 17th, because that's St Patrick's Day.
We get that off.
The building will be closed.
we haven't had any confirmation. We've got confirmation from the Minister she's coming. We haven't had confirmation of attendance or written evidence from Antoinette McKeown. Invitations are out to Dominic Walsh and Peter May.
So Peter May has confirmed for the 10th. We've had written.
And have we heard back from...
Dominic Walsh has made contact with the department, and they are looking at the papers he wants. So that appears to be, I think, facilitated. I don't want to preempt anything, but that was the impression I got, because I've spoken to both Mr. Walsh and Dr. McMahon.
And what is the current position regarding Scarlett Kearney and Rosalie Flanagan?
Rosalie Flanagan we're going to deal with it on, but she's taking legal advice on the oath thing, which we did say was something that people probably should reflect on. And the invitation to Jarlath Kearney, we need to see an outcome to his process that he's undergoing there.
And the process is...
I'm not entirely sure, Chair. What I would suggest is we possibly now go back to legal and ask where we go from there.
So we received the letter from the solicitor, but we haven't heard anything since.
No. We have responded. Last week, after the meeting, members agreed to a response. That went last Thursday. So that's kind of where we are at now, but I'll go back to legal and ask what we should be doing now. That was I wasn't really holding response, but it's kind of to see where that takes us on to.
Any other comments, members? Or okay.
As we get confirmations and we send out new...
The next meeting then will be on Tuesday, the 1st of March in the Senate chamber at 12:30.
Chair,
Oh, sorry. Yes, any other business? Has anyone... Nothing has been highlighted anyway as yet. Any other? No.
Any AOB?
Sorry. Just one... well, I'll raise it here rather than later. Could we write to the Arts Council to get a full list of all of the publishers who have been funded through the Arts Council in the past couple of years to publish books?
Is that just lottery or...?
No, all funding. And also a list of the titles that have been funded.
What time span?
I'd say the last 2 years. Just for information.
Sorry, the last one, sorry?
Last 2 years.
So,
If someone wants to increase that, but they would give us a picture.
Is a list of, is it just books?
publishers and the titles?
The titles, yes, that's all.
The name of the publisher?
Yes,
The name of the
who the publisher is and what books they were funded to. And also, those are the ones that were funded. I wonder, could we also just ask them how many applications they received? That's the outcome of it.
For both?
Yes.
For lottery and exchange?
Yes. I was speaking to somebody in the Arts Council yesterday and I got a sort of general overview of the process and what is eligible and what isn't, but it would be useful to have that, the other aspect of it, around the criteria. Because it seems to be if a book is by somebody from Northern Ireland or a publisher in Northern Ireland, or if the subject matter has relevance to Northern Ireland, which effectively could mean that if somebody in New York decided to write a book about my holidays and touring around the County Antrim coast, even though the person was in America and the publisher in America, it would still be eligible for a grant from the Arts Council.
be eligible to apply.
Yes, but it would meet, they would cover their criteria of what is eligible to apply, yes. So it's just useful to get some clarity around that. Okay.
It was good.
Members are agreeable, think so.
Right.
We'll return to that hopefully next week. Could we closed? Yes, oh no, I'd actually done it, yeah. Yes, we're done at 12:30
12:30, yes.
next Tuesday. So, we're into closed session now, and page